Hello everyone, today I'm going to talk to you about the differences between elements, compounds and mixtures. First up, we're going to start off with elements. Now, elements are our purest form of any chemical. That means they are made up of only one type of atom. Well, what are these different types of atoms? Well, we tend to see them on something called a periodic table. Here you can see on the periodic table we have a whole bunch of atoms ranging from number 1 all the way through to 118. This is all determined by their different sizes. Think of these more like Lego blocks. In this case, that lovely hydrogen only has one dot on the Lego block, whilst 118 over here has 118 different dots on their Lego block. Needless to say, that one's huge in comparison to that tiny little piece of Lego. Some of these elements you could see on our periodic table would be something like potassium at number 19 on our list, oxygen at number 8 on our list, something like sodium at number 11 on our list, something like sulfur at number 16, shortly followed by chlorine at number 17, or helium at number 1, or helium at number 2, and hydrogen at number 1. Consider these all different types of Lego blocks. Please notice how I have colored them to allow you to imagine this. Now, what happens if I took some of these elements and I combined them together? Well, if I took a few of these elements and I tried to bond them together like that, I would actually make something called a compound. Now, a compound is when I take two elements or more and I chemically bond them together. What would this look like? Well, something like this. If I was to take sodium and chlorine and combine them together, so fuse them together, taking two Lego blocks and closing them together, I could make an example of a compound. Now, in this case, compounds kind of have different names depending on what bond they are making. All of these bonds have different names. In fact, if I was to take something like a non-metal and add it to a metal, much like I showed you before with my sodium and chlorine, I'd make a bond called an ionic bond. This ionic bond means that I've connected a metal to a non-metal. In this case, making something called table salt. Another combination that I could have is combining a metal with a metal. In this case, I would make something called a metallic bond. Now, a metallic bond could be something like sodium and potassium, forming a bond together. The last of my combinations could see two non-metals combining together. In this case, they would form a covalent bond, as seen by my two hydrogen and my oxygen over here. H2O, water. Water is an example of two non-metals coming together to make a covalent bond, hydrogen being a gas and oxygen being a gas as well. This brings us to our final part, mixtures. What happens if I find a whole bunch of elements together but they're not chemically touching? Well, let's have a look at that. If I was to take a whole bunch of these elements and place them down, I could have a combination of elements and compounds all within my bucket here. But you can see that some of them aren't chemically touching or fused together. Think of it like your Lego box. Not all the pieces are connected, but they're all gathered in the box together. Well, in this case, you've created a mixture. Another example of a mixture could be something like popcorn with Skittles in the popcorn, which I don't know why someone would do, but it's a good example of two things that would never mix together, but are present in the same area. Now, mixtures do come in two separate forms. My last example of that one was something called a heterogeneous mixture. That means all of the mixture is random and not the same. I'm not seeing a commonality. If, however, everything was uniform and nice and neat, I would make something called a homogeneous mixture. What this might see is a pattern. Within an area. In this case, we've got potassium mixed with sulfur and potassium with sulfur, but they are two separate combinations. In this case, it's created a homogeneous mixture. That's it, ladies and gentlemen. If you like what you see, please hit the subscribe.